Good afternoon, everyone. Today, with my panels, we would like to discuss, choosing the right additive technology and the right contract partner. As I look across the orthopedic industry, the top 10 orthopedic companies currently have in-house additive manufacturing. The top 20 are utilizing additive manufacturing in one way or another, either contracting it out or looking at purchasing and bringing the technology internally. So we thought it was a great opportunity to talk to you with OEMs and with contract manufacturers to give you a feel of what the industry is doing, where it's going, and what the future looks like from this technology. So I want to start off asking the panel here, what does additive manufacturing represent for the future growth of the orthopedic medical space? Is it a necessity or a distraction? Cambria, I asked you.
Perfect. Love to lead it off. I think I'm a little bit biased here, but I think it's a necessity and it's something that's going to continue to grow. At Restore 3D, we focus on personalized orthopedic devices, and so additive has been a way for us to kind of enable and ultimately look to scale personalized offerings for patients. So for us, it's here to stay. We've made significant investment in our manufacturing facility and capabilities to make it a reality.
Andy, you have a
I'll second that. We're very similar. We do a lot of our 3D printing both for the products now and the products for the future. Everything that we've done in the past being subtractive gives you your plates, your screws, your rods. As you go forward, the additive gives you a much broader breadth of types of products you can design, the intricacies within it, and the capabilities. So we are also very heavily involved and very heavily invested.
Great, thank you. So it kind of leads me into the different technologies. Davey, this question is for you. So there's a multitude of different technology in the additive space. Powder bed laser, powder bed fusion, are for the E-beam. Can you give us a feel of how those technologies play in the industry? Which is the best for what application, or is there, it's just user's choice?
Yeah, and there's even a lot more like technologies than that you mentioned. So if you look nowadays at the overview of all the different technologies for additive manufacturing, it's like an endless list. So I think like one thing you can really do well in the orthopedic market is like look at what your competitors are using, and try to see what they've been successfully using, and then kind of going from there as a starting point to investigate. When you talk about the two most established technologies like EBM, so like electron beam melting and laser, like DMLS or laser powder bed fusing or whatever you want to call it, then you have to do really like your homework. So it's not just about this machine is a little bit more expensive than that machine, or this machine has more lasers, but you really have to look at like the really the cost per part, like in a lot more detail. So two lasers might be slower than one laser, so don't let like the specs on paper determine your decision, but like more look at like actually building that application, properly evaluating that application, looking then at the real cost of like the whole process chain, and also always know like whether you do it like directly to the manufacturers of the machines or through a contract manufacturer. Always know that you're both evaluating the technology as well as the user of the technology, because it's definitely not a plug-and-play technology, and so always like keep that in mind when you're making your decisions.
You bring up an interesting point. So you're saying the technology is not plug and play?
Oh, definitely not. There's still like what I like to call like an art to 3D printing. Of course, we from the OEM side try to make it easier for the users of the technology to be successful. But still today, like you need experts operating those machines to really get the most out of it. And so that's also where like, contract manufacturers with a lot of experience come in, or working together with like Additive Minds for EOS, where we teach our customers to use the technology successfully. So that portion of like knowledge, know-how in using the technology is really important to be successful with the technology.
Great, thank you. Martin, as a contract manufacturer, David mentioned cost. Can you share with the audience just a ballpark figure of what it would cost and the time frame to become a contract manufacturer in this space?
So I'll put it in the context of orthopedics, because we're at an orthopedics conference. So we're looking at, for ourselves, an ISO 1345 quality management system. That was our basis of what we were trying to do to achieve a quality management system that, whether you're a CNC facility, whether you're an additive manufacturing group, we had to go in and probably invest 2 to 3 years of time, because it wasn't just about developing geometries, it's about developing metals. And you are a foundry when you're an additive manufacturing group. You're a foundry that is now converting metals, and you're welding metals, and then you're putting into a certain geometry, and the chemistry of that metal changes. And so we had to spend a lot of time, at least 2 to 3 years, and let's just call it multiple millions of dollars and man hours. It was in the thousands and thousands of man hours to develop that quality management system for an additive process. So it took us at least 3 years to get our ISO 1345. And then it's just not that, that's just your basis. And then it's your internal qualification system that you are now qualifying your additional machines and your subtractive machines on top of that. So obviously we're, as a contractor, we're not just an additive group. You have to have, when it comes to metals, you have to have that full service, the whole suite of subtractive machines, and understand how you're going to qualify both of those components for your clients, and really understanding your clients' needs. And so we had to build an entire quality system, not about us as we're not an OEM or a contract manufacturer, but meet the needs of our customers that all have varying levels of quality requirements. So it took us a long time and millions of dollars to get there.
Thank you. Okay, so Andy, this is for you, and Camby is secondary for you. When choosing to insource or outsource a partner, why did you choose insourcing?
So we originally were outsourced. We had a couple of sources, and that was basically to prove out the technology, prove out our concepts of what we wanted to make. As much product development as we do, it's the speed to market for us. So for us to develop the expertise, and I'll back you up, it is 2 to 3 years after you have the machine on your floor before you really know how to print and how to make a product. So for us, as we keep developing product after product, having it insourced where we can go from, here's our envision of a product, draw it up, print it, draw it up, print it, iteration back and forth till you get a product, just pure speed.
Okay.
So our decision was all about the speed and quality outcome. Contract manufacturing absolutely has a place, but yeah, I can't back him up more than what he said on it takes years to get to be good at it. So in-house, much faster, but you better be in it for the long term, not the short term.
Camry, how about you?
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I mean, for us, the kind of lead up to choosing to insource was kind of predicated by years of university research, and so we definitely learned that these machines were not plug and play in a lot of ways to print really good parts, but also really bad parts. So that kind of got us comfortable with the idea of insourcing the technology. I think for us at that time, it was kind of a cost positioning and a lead time that we were really interested in kind of owning the manufacturing end to end. I think since then, we've kind of seen the benefit of what you're saying, being able to iterate really quickly, Andy, as you're trying to design new things. I think the other thing that's been very fruitful for us is that the R&D engineering team has been able to see the parts being manufactured, how they're coming out, when parts aren't produced well, what was the wrong support strategy and things like that. And we've built up this great kind of tribal knowledge internally to kind of know the best way to produce the types of parts that we're working on. So for us, that's been, a really big benefit as well to having it inside the walls of our facility.
At any time, would you look at outsourcing? If you got to a point where you stabilized your manufacturing, would you look at outsourcing so you could have more internal capability to develop?
No.
Nope.
Basically, the learning curve and the cost is what you mentioned. It's all the upfront.
Okay.
So then once you've leaped over that barrier, that hurdle, adding another machine is not nearly as hard, and you can control it, the time, the cost, the lead time, quality, all of the above is why we would keep it in-house.
Yeah, for us, I think the only reason to kind of outsource is just kind of scaling faster than we could keep up with. And we've definitely had challenges with that, but I think the intention is primarily to keep it internal.
So Martin, as a contract manufacturer, what do you look at to provide your customers from a capability standpoint that would entice them to want to come to you?
So our background, we have deep roots in the medical device testing, research and development, literally clinical trials in orthopedics. So we were able to come at the market very differently, where there's different groups, different business models. So some companies focused on data collection, focused on marketing, developing multiple platforms at the same time. We were able to help small companies and have conversations with a lot larger companies saying we want to rapidly scale, we want help with the FDA, we have to understand, the function, designing for the process. Their R&D departments were so busy doing other things with different, that they needed someone to come in, step in and act like that R&D department, act like the pre-commercialization group, then the manufacturer, and then of course we work with other partners as well. So what they came to us is that we had that understanding that the rapid scalability within an organization, we can help that group, but it's not everybody. There has to be a business model that makes sense to use additive manufacturing and a partner like ourselves in the additive manufacturing process. And it's usually speed to market. That's one of the things that we've noticed, that we're very nimble. We're able to understand, again, some of the core basis of your functional requirements from an orthopedic perspective, and potentially the end use customer, which is going to be your surgeon at the end of the day. We have a lot of that background experience, and we're able to relay that to our customers very, very well. I think that's another reason why a group would come to a very certified organization that understands the orthopedic space well, and that's why they outsource. It's about speed to market.
Let me jump in there if I could. You're buying his tribal knowledge. We've developed the tribal knowledge.
That's right.
If you're trying to get to speed to market and you don't have 3 years of experience in it and you're trying to develop a product, go to the contract manufacturer. He has the tribal knowledge. He knows how to do the bill supports. He knows all the tricks of the trade. So it's a speed to market.
Agreed.
You mentioned speed to market. So we talked about 3 years to, once you purchase a machine, to develop the capability, right? On top of that, what is the lead time to develop a product to actually do all the development and testing to get it to market?
I'll jump in there. As we were discussing earlier, I said it's easy for us. We have easy parts. He has very difficult parts. So it's all over the continuum. When we're making small titanium spinal implants, it's much easier. You don't have the complexity that you have. So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I would say it's, again, like all projects in the orthopedic space, you're developing instruments, you're developing tibial trays, spine device, etc. Very application specific. Depending on your regulatory requirements, is it cutting edge? Is it a reverse total hip system, for instance? Is it something that is very different? Obviously, your regulatory path is very different. If you're manufacturing something similar to other, again, predicate devices, it'll be a lot quicker. So for us, we're seeing that some of our larger implements, there's a lot more, let's just call it hurdles to go through. Larger devices, there's a lot more work that we have to do, so it takes us a little bit longer, especially on the quality side, and then making sure that we have that right predicate as well. So there's a lot that goes into that, and I think that again, we are trying to shorten that time. So speed to market is where we focus on, but it's not always there, just because the device is actually more complicated and it requires a lot of feedback from the client.
So in speed to market, Davey, is there anything in the technology today or anything that's coming down the pike that'll help advance that capability of speed to market that is going to allow contract manufacturers and OEMs to generate product in half the time, say, that we do today?
Yeah, one thing which really jumps to mind, and it's something we have very recently launched as EOS, is called Smart Fusion. And so, as you were saying before, you need a lot of tribal knowledge. I love that word, actually. I really know the technology in depth to be successful with it. And so we recognize as EOS, okay, we have to make that faster. We have to make that easier. And Smart Fusion, what it does is basically it's a thermal management of our process. So where in the past, you design a certain process and you apply that to a certain geometry, and then you print it and you see, what comes out of the machine, and you start adapting and changing and tweaking, and that's where all that knowledge comes in. We want to make that process a lot easier, and with Smart Fusion what we do is like you still have kind of like a process going in, but you're also at the same time monitoring that process through like a thermal camera. You can see that due to like the specific design, due to the fact that you don't want to have supports in certain places, parts of your implant, and for example, are going to overheat, and you are through closed loop feedback, you're going to basically adjust the process on the fly. And the big advantage there is that you therefore like get like much quicker to a first time right approach. And think in the orthopedic space about like, for example, patient-specific implants. Every time, like your implant is going to be different. Every time you have to, engineer it a little bit out. If you have a great engineer who really understands the process well, you can do it. But you need a lot of experience, and this is what with Smart Fusion we try to do. So basically, kind of take into account the geometry, the actual physics happening, and kind of like on the fly. Change your process in order to, first time right, get it out of the printer.
So can you go into a little depth on multi-laser and the size of the build plate and advantages or disadvantages of those?
Yep. So we have like 1 laser, 2 lasers, 4 lasers. There's companies out there with like 6, 8, 10 lasers, and we don't believe in kind of just adding lasers to a machine like makes a lot of sense, because laser scanners, they're the most expensive components of a 3D printer. That's one, so you don't like really like reduce costs that much because your equipment becomes very expensive. Secondly, all of those lasers to create like there's smoke, there's splatters in metal 3D printing, and when you have like 10 lasers working at the same time, it becomes a very difficult and complex a situation where like those 10 lasers shouldn't interfere with each other. So rather what we would try to do is have, for example, 2, 4 lasers, still like, having multiple lasers, but limit that and get more out of 1 laser. And there's many ways you can do that. So of course you need like higher power lasers. So rather than 400 watts, you go to a kilowatt or whatever, but then also start playing with your beam size. So for example, where you need the resolution, you have a very small beam. Where you need productivity, you expand that beam to a much bigger beam. You can also play with like the shape of the beam where you reduce splatters and so on. So there's a lot of innovation and kind of really, the laser itself, the beam shape, and trying to increase productivity and therefore reduce costs rather than just like blindly add more lasers and say like, yeah, the machine is now better.
Thank you. In regards to the different types of machines. So I've heard that if you build a part and develop it on a certain platform, that it can be transferred to any other platform and have success. Is that possible? And can you give the audience, anybody that has knowledge of this, an idea if this is something that is applicable, or is it just kind of fiction?
So I can start here, and then I think like with more people with experience there and here. So we're saying before, it's not plug and play technology, and it also comes to like transferring. So personally, I've seen a lot of projects where a part or an implant, for example, was like first printed on other technology, and then they said like, yeah, for whatever reason, we want to move it to your technology. And it's not plug and play, so that also means when you have to transfer to other technologies, you have to have the application knowledge, the equipment knowledge to really understand like the differences and then kind of like adapt your process accordingly. A great example for me is even like, EBM, which we talked about before, so electron beam melting. So rather than using a laser, electron beam, I've done a lot of projects where I had to go from a completely different technology, electron beam, bring it to laser, and I was not allowed to change design and so on, and so I had to figure out through the process how to make exactly the same thing on electron beam. And this is all possible if you really understand the technology and understand the capabilities and how to tweak your processes in order to make that happen. So therefore, in general, I think it is possible with the right amount of knowledge. And at least I can speak from, let's say, other technologies to EOS. I'm not sure if that works the same way, the other way around, for example, because, for example, E-beam, you don't have the same resolution as in laser, and so therefore like the other way will probably not work that well.
I'm happy to hear Davey say that he thinks it's possible to go from one system to another because we're in the process of trying to do that right now and kind of cross-qualify multiple systems. And so for us, it's been something very interesting because our tribal knowledge has been kind of very deep in one system, and now we're trying to take that knowledge and recognize that it's not going to transfer one-to-one, but try to kind of take what we do know and work with the EOS team to kind of figure out how to reproduce our parts on their systems. So, you know, for us, it's been a learning process, and I think you have to kind of go into it eyes open, saying they're not going to print perfect the first time. You can't just export the CAD file over. I think we did try that just to kind of get a baseline. It didn't go great. I think the print failed pretty quickly, but we knew that, and that was kind of part of the investment in kind of adopting that evolving technology for us. So I think it's something that's not spoken a lot about in industry. Typically, people kind of invest in one printer technology and then they stay with that and they feel locked in, you know, particularly from a regulatory standpoint. They feel, you know, to prove to FDA that they're producing equivalent parts isn't worth, you know, the effort to do it. And that's something that we've tried to be kind of printer agnostic and continue to adopt the evolving technology. And so it's something that we've taken on to try to do.
Well, thank you.
And it's going pretty good.
Thanks.
In regards to the technology, but let's go further back. Let's talk about designing to the process. How important is designing to the process to the success of additive manufacturing? Andy?
Very important. The features that you're designing into the product, what you can do with the product, secondary machining that you can eliminate. It gives you a lot of the different avenues. So when we're designing it, anything that we can do on additive, we try to do it on additive. If you can eliminate components, eliminate parts, eliminate secondary operations, add features, all of that factors into the design. So when we hire engineers, we for sure want them to go through the whole process of learning how it's made before they start designing the product.
Martin, any?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I'll even tie in the previous question, designing for the process. So, Canberra, you're moving from a laser to a laser system. We have experience, like Davey was talking about, moving from electron beam to laser, and then going back to electron beam, then going back to those are two fundamentally different processes.
Yeah.
You have to design to that process, design for the subtractive process in that process, design for different thermal gradients across those. So you have to think about all these pieces when you're designing your components. So 100% the application, Chuck, is very specific to the process, and then you're designing a process to that application. So we have, again, and we saw benefits of both. So there was some speed, benefits over here, but yet so it comes down to your business case. All this that we're talking about, hopefully we're trying to translate what we're talking about to your business case for your application. And so we typically want to pick the best process to the application and then pick that best application to our business model. So I think that, again, what we're trying to, speak about here is a little bit more about you are trying to design to the process, but also remember there's a business case behind all this. There's money behind all this. And so this is what we've been focusing on for most of today.
Yeah.
So
Maybe, sorry, one more thing to add. So as EOS, then it's again very important that we acknowledge that there are these design rules, and we are trying to expand them. So where in the past it was the 45-degree rule, if you're familiar, now we try to push that number down to 20, 10, and so on by the innovations we do, so that you get a lot more design freedom again in order to even have more applications which are feasible with the technology.
That's right. Yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier about speed to market and talking about the development time. So I personally have an experience where we are now releasing a production product that took us 7 years from ideation to releasing the first production part. Is this an anomaly, or is this a standard in this technology?
I think it probably depends on what the part is. It sounds like probably what y'all were doing was something novel and pretty complex if it took 7 years. I think to Andy's point, we've gotten really good as an industry at making spinal interbody fusion devices, for example, and I think that knowledge what might have been tribal a couple years ago is now kind of percolated through. And I think there's other devices, tibial trays, things like that, again, we've gotten pretty good at making. For us, a lot of what we do on the patient-specific side, we're kind of having to learn when we kind of take a new case type and are trying to develop something new. We have to iterate internally, but we have to do it really quickly because there's a patient waiting on the other end of that. So for us, we move on the matter of weeks, hopefully not 7 years to deliver a patient-specific device. But again, it kind of depends on if you're trying to push the bounds of the design envelope that we've kind of gotten comfortable in as an industry already.
I think that in the case of this particular product, it was more of an education to the customer than it was to the development product. And so I'm asking, for those that experience, is it standard to take that amount of time or any amount of length of time to train the customer in what the final product is going to be? And also, what advantages does additive bring to the orthopedic market, where they're willing to pay more money for an additive part than they would be for a subtractive part of the same type? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of examples. I think for obviously demand supply chain issues, there's the ability to look at where they obviously a company might be willing to pay a little bit more if they know, because again, one of the benefits of additive is the ability for us to move very, very quickly compared to other types of supply chains. I would say that would be one specific feature. Another one is obviously there's an ability for us to create very complex structures that are very difficult, and there's multiple processes in a conventional manufacturing method to create it. For instance, a lattice. We can grow a lattice very, very quickly and efficiently, where there could be multiple steps in a conventional process. And I think that some companies, again, speed to market, if they're developing different SKUs, a number of different SKUs, additive actually has a strong advantage there. We can develop multiple SKUs with grown topologies and understanding how to analyze those topologies relatively quickly with different techniques and different technologies that we have. And you're able to actually create that very, very rapidly. And that speed to market, that makes a lot of difference for some companies. They might be willing to pay more for that as well.
Perfect, thank you. So one last question, and this is mainly for you, Martin, but for the group, is, when we talk about additive manufacturing and we talk about ideation of the product through production, so end to end, how important is a contract manufacturer to provide an end-to-end solution to the OEM?
Excellent question. There's a couple of ways to answer that, but fundamentally, the answer actually, whether you're a small organization, orthopedic company, large orthopedic company, another group that's just in a university or lab, what we're realizing with additive manufacturing and the complexities associated with additive manufacturing, we're able to be more aggressive on our designs. And what we're seeing now, and we even heard it today just a few times in our conversations that we've had with different clients, is that they want a holistic solution. They want to focus on data, they want to focus on their clients, they want to focus on basically the end market. They want to come up to a contract manufacturer and issue a purchase order for that holistic solution. Can you help us with design, ideation, testing, obviously developing of those prototypes, manufacturing, packaging? Can you help us with clinical trials? That's happened a couple of times, believe it or not, that we're a manufacturer and they've asked us if we can help them with clinical trials. So that end-to-end solution is something that is, I think, very, very important. It's going to be becoming more realistic that there's groups going to have to offer these, and we're fortunate enough that we've been able to, put together a partnership more recently with TCOMET in the US. But we believe that an end-to-end solution is actually what larger organizations are going to start requesting, because they want to focus their business on the client, they want to focus on data. And I think that this is where we have to actually become a little bit more sophisticated and have that holistic offering. And I think that is becoming more of a trend.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can confirm that, so working with these OEMs, and then for EOS, it's always open. Do you want to go to a contract manufacturer? You want to insource our technology? And where in the past it was more like the OEMs insourcing and kind of building up that knowledge, like the two of you have done. I think that's the dream scenario, if you can have that knowledge in-house. But we don't live in a dream world, we live in the reality. And like, as we said, time to market and having that expertise and having like, let's say like your product out because, you know, you're behind your competitors. That's where like then the total solution really makes a lot of sense, or a combination of two. So one doesn't like exclude the other one. So I think like in general, we're very open and working with our customers to both kind of have a short-term, mid-term solution, as well as kind of like having at least 1 or 2 machines in your R&D lab to really build the knowledge so that your designers can really understand the technology on such a deep level that they can really design to it.
Great, thank you. Well, that's all the questions we have. Any questions from the audience?
Basically, I was wondering if a company wanted to insource their manufacturing, and so they purchased 3D printers, would they be able to leverage the effort and the time that it took for, let's say, your company to get your machinery validated, similar to selecting a predicate that's already been approved?
Yeah.
Let me jump into that one real quick. These guys are trying to sell, so they have a different perspective. But I will guarantee you, that's his whole job, is to make it easier for you to buy his equipment, take all of the tribal knowledge that we've all shared and grown. He's taking it back. Their company helps us, they help them, they help everybody. So when he's trying to sell you that, absolutely he's trying to get as much tribal knowledge to you so you can buy that machine, and then he can buy a big house.
Or my bosses or their bosses, but yes.
Somebody gets to buy a big house, so I'm going to jump in, but yeah, that's what he's,
Yeah,
that's his job.
you're describing basically the drug dealer model where they bring you in, they help you develop the application, they get you to be successful so that you go buy one printer and then the next printer and the next printer, and then Davey's driving away in a new car. So yeah, that's definitely the model, and it works really well.
And then I'm
your
there,
house.
and
You got
then
your
I'm there to tell you that's not a good idea. You don't want to do that.
But I think at the end of the day, though, you still have to understand that when they walk away, you're there operating the machine, and you will have failures, and you'll fail, and you'll have to learn on your own. Right? They'll be there to provide some answers, but you still will fail, and that's not bad. That's success, actually, right? You know, the one thing I say about additive manufacturing, you can't turn to page so-and-so of the machinist handbook and find the answer. It doesn't exist. So it's trial and error.
And I think that goes to the complex geometries. Every part is different. Everyone's going to have their own challenges, so he will not have seen all the parts.
Right. Any other questions?
Martin, I believe you mentioned that you have partnered with a few different organizations to offer an end-to-end solution for your customers to come to you, one-stop shop, and get everything done. Can you talk a little bit more about the kind of offering, what that one-stop shop looks like, and some of the advantages that you get being a one-stop shop through that partnership that maybe others on the market aren't able to offer?
Yeah, so I think that where we look at this is depending on the stage of your development cycle, whether you have a new concept that you want to start deriving. It could be at the level of working with your orthopedic surgeons and you want to develop a project. Fortunately, we've teamed up. We have the Orthopedic Innovation Center. That's core knowledge for the last 13 years is developing, testing medical devices of all types. So they can get in at the very ground level. Prototypes could be manufactured relatively quickly by an organization like ourselves. Then they can then test these inside of a cadaveric lab, getting a feel for those sizing, etc. Then we get into looking at developing the next phases of that design for the process, for the manufacturing process, where Precision ADM can come in, start manufacturing those components. Then we'd be working with Tecomet. Tecomet will be finishing off those components. And then in the end, we have, again, an entire process along that where EOS understands how do we optimize that? How do we make that business case very strong? How do we actually reduce costs, whether it be support structures, thermal optimization? So during that whole process, they're kind of monitoring this, helping us with different aspects of that process, make it very aggressive. At the same time, with Tecomet, we have that finished, we have a packaged solution. So I think that that's not really offered. In the end, when you say, Also, we'd like to, after we finish this, can you run a clinical trial for us? Actually, yes, we can. And that's something that the Orthopedic Innovation Center now offers as well. So we have that full holistic. I think that's kind of like the first, I would say first to market when you start talking about this end-to-end structure that's done as a service versus an OEM doing this all themselves.
And the whole reason behind doing this was to be able to deliver a product quicker to the market for the customer. By doing early iteration, early design, it speeds up the process and reduces the development time for the customer, which in that case saves money and time.
Another, and it's also, we're talking about North America right now, but in Europe, for instance, they have different regulatory. So if you have interest in getting into Europe, again, part of this network is to continue. How do you get beyond our borders, beyond just the U.S.? How do I get into Europe? Different regulatory standards. They're very rigorous when it comes to radiostereometric analysis for their implants. For instance, hips and knees. In order to get into certain countries, you got to have an RCT that's developed. That's part of what the OIC would do. So again, part of that holistic kind of approach is you might not want all that. That's okay. We might just be additive manufacturing components. You might be finishing them, or you're just going to want to do half of that yourself. I think that's where we have this kind of different way of approaching, but in a holistic manner versus just looking at a segment. All we're going to do is 3D print a device for you.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope you got something out of the panel discussion, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.